Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Shawnee Alliance Church.
It is our desire to invite you into conversations about the life topics and questions we all face.
Wherever you are in your faith journey, we invite you to explore the freedom found in a transformed life. Hey everybody, welcome back to Tuesday Talks podcast. Tuesday Talks? Did I say that? I'm rebranding our podcast. We are Shawnee Alliance Church, and you are joining us because you came across some content dealing with sex. That came out awesome, even though that was not rehearsed at all. So I want to take a second to pause and say, if you did not listen to our prior episode, then jump back to episode 1 titled The Value of Sex. You want to lead into that because that's kind of our opener. That's where we kind of set the groundwork for what we're going to be talking about over a few episodes here. And I have alongside me the wonderful ladies, Bridgett Blood and Sarah Kennedy.
Yes.
Insert the choir, the round of applause from a stadium that is saying hello and greeting you both.
Hello.
So we finished last time with a few topics. We were talking about that all of us in some way, shape, or form have been undertaught and overexposed. Yep. We discussed that it's hard to protect something that you don't have any value for. We kind of touched on, like, what are some of the things that you were taught about sex? Yeah. And then one of the most important things, where you're getting your information matters. And so hopefully if you were able to pause your car, hit a stoplight or whatever, and check out some of the resources that we provided in the link. If not, feel free to go back at any point in time because there's YouTube videos, websites, other podcasts, you name it. Right. The intent is for not necessarily us to be your one-stop shop because, as my buddy Chris Cruz said in one of the videos that Bridgett and I watched, that we tend to be like pastors get to be like DJs, and so we pick up a lot of things, and it's part of our responsibility to consume ourselves with lots of information to be able to replay that back to you. And so you'll find some things that mirror some of the things that we discussed in our podcast.
Absolutely. And it's taking different language.
Yeah. Yep.
So you might relate to one thing that, one of the people says in one, podcast, and another book, you might, wow, that really connected with me. So just you can kind of pick and choose the information that really touches you, brings that healing that we talked about last time, and allows you to be free.
Yeah. Yep.
And so today we're moving on to how to create a vision for physical intimacy. So how to develop a purity plan.
A purity plan?
And
This is new language for me.
Right? So there are questions that we want to ask, and please write them down, save them in your phone, have these conversations. It is something that's more geared toward the dating relationship, but it is also information that we can take into our marriages, into our conversations, into our relationships, just all around. So,
Yeah, and so these are actual real-life questions. These are designed to be used between couples. This is not just like we said, copy and paste them, write them in your phone. You want to have them with you to be able to have those types of conversations because typically, what we've seen portrayed is that you've got a one-night stand, or if you're a little, have a little more privacy, typically by that third date, right? Isn't that's the culture thing about the third date? You're sleeping with people. Yeah. And you're insane if you wait a month.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's crazy.
What's wrong?
Crazy. But we want, like we said, we're going to go back to this. We deserve a better story about sex. And sex was designed to cost you your life. And so with that, having a value for sex, we actually need to be able to have these conversations. And so kind of the first question for people to ask is, where are we at in our relationship? This is you hear it, the DTR, the define the relationship. But we just want to say that the DTR is not a one-time conversation. It's something that you should be having over and over again. This will specifically, impact dating couples, but in marriages, like what season are we in?
Yeah.
What does it look like for us to be connected right now? What does physical intimacy look like for us? And that changes based on season. And so that's just a really great question to have of like, hey, where's your heart at? Where are we going? The best resources we love for dating is the Intimacy Ladder video for a Moral Revolution with Cole Zick and Jade Allerton. And so that kind of started that conversation. It'll walk you through, like, what are the actual stages of a relationship? One of the things that Jason Ballatin says in that is, your level of physical intimacy should never surpass your level of trust. And so I just want to say kind of the gut check should be, if you are not comfortable to be talking about it, there probably is not enough trust to be doing it.
Right.
Oh, I couldn't ever ask about that. Or, okay, well, we're doing it. So we actually have to have trust. And if we can't talk about it, these conversations are going to be weird. There's going to be a little anxiety around it of like, hey, I actually would like to talk to you about kissing, or I'd like to talk to you about sex. Like there is some weirdness with it, not because it's wrong, but because we've been in this shame culture that, hush, hush. But we have to kind of work through that and, move along. So that's kind of the first question is, let's just decide where we're at in the relationship.
And this is for married couples too, because don't tune out. We talked about this in the first podcast. The DTR, detail the relationship, because I know as Sarah and I both married. You're married to my cousin.
Yes.
And a lot of people
define that one.
a lot of the people in the church don't always know that. So Sarah's married to my cousin, and so we both have Kennedy's last name. But as married couples with kids, we could be thinking like DTR, detail the relationship. Well, define the relationship. Well, the state of our relationship is our kids have umpteen million different things that they need to go to: sports, dance, choir, band, you name it, and then by the end of the day, you may not have a lot of gas left in the tank. But for married couples, this could be a defining moment to say, oh, well, now our language that we're speaking is so strong and healthy about this. She really does just have a headache. It's not just an excuse.
Correct.
Correct. The headache is real, because otherwise we could talk freely and just say, not tonight or whatever that case.
No, that's so good. Yeah. That's so good of having that conversation of you don't have to, we're not using people, and there's no shame in that, right? And so newsflash for single people, you're not going to be having sex all the time when you're married.
Yeah.
You've got lots of other activities happening. And just because one partner wants sex doesn't mean the other person's, feels well, or their medical issues, or, rough things, or
headspace.
Seasons of needing to process through stuff of like, hey, like me having sex tonight would actually just me be avoiding a problem. So I'm going to say, let me actually go process through this with Jesus, and we'll check in.
Yeah.
Those are great conversations to have. So going back to kind of where are we at in the relationship, my second question is there enough trust for this type of physical intimacy? Is it the right time? Because we want to take the language off of sex is bad before marriage, sex is good after marriage. Sex is a good, beautiful thing, and sexuality. So we're gonna kind of talk about what are your boundaries? In a dating relationship, you actually need to be having conversations about kissing, about touching people's butts, snuggling. Are we comfortable, laying on the couch? Are we comfortable just sitting on the couch?
How late should I stay over at their home? Before, it's all these setting boundaries, and this is a purity plan, and purity plan doesn't just mean, again, it's not just for the dating aspects of it. It's completely okay to have a purity plan. Not even, you're already engaging in sex with your spouse.
Yeah, but purity doesn't mean abstinence.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Purity means protecting the holiness of sex.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Snaps.
So you don't,
Yeah.
You're not an unpure person,
Right.
right? Because then you have, I mean, especially in church culture, I mean, you have trauma either way. Either you've had a lot of sexual experiences and then so you feel all this shame, or you've had no sexual experiences because you've been so afraid that it's bad that all of a sudden you get married and you're like, well, this is bad. My body doesn't know how to respond because I've always been told this. So I'm having all these trauma shame responses because this is bad. How is this all, like, how is my brain supposed to already go, oh, well, now it's good? It doesn't work that way. So yeah, going back to that, like actually having a conversation. Again, I'm saying this whether you're 15 or whether you're 65 and you're dating. I don't care how old you are. This is still going to be the conversations that you're going to have. And so, Josh brought that up of, a kissing curfew. Understanding the biology of our bodies. I do want to say that hormones are a big factor in what's allowed and what's not allowed. So for some couples, it might not always have to be, oh, this is always, I never want you to, we'll just give a real life example, right? For some people, women can be at a spot where him kissing her neck is fine. She might be at another point in her cycle and it's like, ready, take me to the room.
Yeah.
Right? And then for, men have a daily hormonal cycle. So typically men have a higher sex drive in the morning and in the evening. Nothing bad about it, but you have to understand the biology of your body.
Yeah.
And so having those conversations is that, sometimes there will be, hey, I've actually had trauma here. I'm not comfortable with that. Hey, it can be I don't actually have enough trust with you to introduce that. I don't want you touching my butt. I don't want, I'm not ready to be in a bathing suit around you. All the things that kind of processing through that. I don't want you rubbing my back. Just talk about it. Hey, I'm actually only comfortable holding your hand right now. Know that that's okay. Jason Valentin talks about that in the Intimacy Ladder is it's okay to ask to say no thank you, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, actually, I'm not comfortable with that. It's not mean to the other person.
Yeah. Well, and it's important to note, to have those conversations long and, to have them in advance before you get to that point. So, you're dating and that date night is coming up this Friday night, and so you're looking forward to it. And maybe you've been on one date, maybe you haven't been, dating very long at all, but establishing these within the relationship because that sets the tone so that there's no expectations of what to expect. So yeah, I'm a guy, I'm picking you up at 7 p.m. tonight. And, well, if we're still together at 11 o'clock tonight, what does that mean? We already know exactly how things are going to go. And I know, Bridgett, you've done such an amazing job of relaying this information, sharing with Sarah and I, who have been married now, again, several years in our own marriages, and I know I respect it so much the way that you have gone about that.
Yeah, and I think just the big thing of we're actually getting out of the how far is too far, right? How much can we do? Our clothes were still on, so technically, that's not what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
I'm saying again, sex is always designed. As a gift. Sexuality is always designed as a gift. And so engaging in physical intimacy with another person is actually a gift that I'm giving. It is not something I'm taking. It's not for me to feel secure, for me to have connection, for me to have my worth and identity. It's actually saying I'm actually giving a gift to you. You get to decide what you're comfortable sharing. And so, that's totally fine to say, I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah.
And move forward around that. I wanted to say though, that for couples, in those first couple weeks of dating, you might not even be exclusive, right? You're I want to go out to coffee, going out to drinks, whatever, you're just trying to get to know people. But when you're in a place where you're saying, hey, I actually want to spend some time committed to you, this is not a, you have to, marry the person.
Right.
right? This is regardless of how this relationship ends, I can still say with honor that I honored you the best way that I can in regards to sexuality. And that doesn't mean that you we're afraid to look at each other. We have to give side hugs. Like, no, weird stuff. Like, but how are we having those conversations? And those are going to be frequent conversations around physical intimacy. And
I think that authenticity brings freedom to your relationship.
Yep.
And it doesn't have to be a weird thing. We have made it a weird thing, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And I would say, as far as dating goes, as you date in community, have other people.
Yeah.
And again, I don't, like I said, whether you're 15 or you're 65, I don't really care. Have other people that you're processing with, that you're saying that you are sharing. That you're sharing the triggers you're having, that you're sharing the fears you're having, you're sharing the dreams you're having. You know what I mean? Not like physical dreams, but go ahead, we can do that. Prophetic dreams too. I'm just talking about I'm really dreaming of. Is this person I want to spend the rest of my life with? Or this has been really great and I've grown a lot, but I'm actually okay that this was a good season and I'm ready to, move on. Those are great conversations to have. And it's just, I guess what we're saying is you need to have conversations, plural.
Well, because when we don't talk about it, we're keeping it taboo.
Yeah.
When we're choosing not to. And so parents, it's so important for you to be having conversations around your kids. What age? Gonna blow your mind? Probably already. My son, my youngest is 8, and you know what? I need to have that conversation with him right now because they're in school. Some of you have kids that are being homeschooled, but they're still being around other friends from the neighborhood or whatever that's like. We discussed in the first episode, we have things that we came across as kids, maybe as early as 5 years old, an understanding of sex. And so it's important for you to put language around that now with your child, because I can tell you that as we're also freely talking about this subject amongst you with a podcast, a lot of these conversations, to some degree are going on in our homes. And if we're talking about it right now to our children, it is not going to be a weird thing for them to, it's going to be more weird for you as a parent probably than what it is going to be for your kid to be able to hear this.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And what a great bonding time for you guys to be able to be so open about a conversation. And so that, as your kids get older, that you can be to some degree a mentor of
Absolutely.
Where to go with, these feelings, these emotions. To be able to help them navigate their dating life is going to be so crucial. But Bridgett, you're so right. To be able to have mentors, people in your life that you can talk to and navigate that relationship out in, you said community. Yes. And so, just to be able to have somebody key in with you and ask questions like, well, how far is too far for you? In your relationship, how would you define what is too far? Because again, if we're building this plan ahead of time to make sure that before you go into a situation, you're going to need to be able to know what's too far for your limitations.
We're going to go here. I want to have what is sex? I love Bianca Olthoff. Her definition I love is sex is genitalia to genitalia, mouth to genitalia, or hand to genitalia. And so we believe that those experiences are beautiful and protected in the covenant of marriage.
Yeah.
So we're not saying, oh, well, as long as you're not having intercourse, oral sex is fine before marriage. I just want to clarify that. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because those are all, sexual acts that need to have covenant protection. What we're talking about is kissing, snuggling,
The butt taps.
The butt taps. I love. And the reason I say that, So I grew up in a very affectionate, like household. And so like for me, like my grandma, like whenever she would hug you, she'd be like, love ya. And she'd give you a little butt tap. So for me, that's not even a sexual connotation.
Okay.
And I grew up with Brazilians, so everybody kissed everybody on the cheek. So I grew up in a very affectionate house. And I think that will play what you're comfortable sharing in a relationship will have a lot of family of origin roots to it. If you grew up in a very affectionate family, for you, kissing early on might be like, oh, well, I just kiss people. Like, I mean, that's, very normal. But if you grew up in a very like physically affectionate family, that might be something that you introduce later on. And I do want to say that you don't have to introduce everything all at once. I think that's what these romance movies have shown us of like, I meet this person, I kiss this person. Like kissing is really important too. I want to have a value to that, that you can actually date someone and say, hey, I don't actually have enough trust to kiss you right now. Not that I don't want to, but I actually want to protect that when we have more trust. I'm not saying you have to wait to your wedding day to kiss. If some people have that value and that's fine. But I think that, having those experiences and talking about them. So let's actually give the example of dating example and married example. So dating example, right? Let's just, we're going to take kissing for the context of dating.
Yeah.
You're in a dating relationship. You want to introduce kissing. So you are having a conversation beforehand about what are our boundaries around that. So, we're fine kissing alone, but we decided that being in a dark room, horizontal on the couch watching a movie probably doesn't set us up for success.
Right.
Because the goal is to actually partner with Holy Spirit. And this is for single people or married people. Hey, Holy Spirit, what are the safe, pure body memories that you want me to share in a way that's fun and healing? That's actually leading me into discovery, not closer to sex. So we're not in the dating relationship, we're not trying to be like, how far can we get before we're ready, Yeah. We're not like foreplaying.
Yeah.
We're just saying, hey God, what's here to explore in sexuality? What's pure, what's holy, what's safe? But actually having those types of conversations. So you're having that conversation beforehand. You're introducing that new level of physical intimacy. Then you're having a check-in conversation or two after it to say, how did that go for you? Did you feel safe? Was your heart okay? Physically, like, was that something you enjoyed? Was it not something you enjoyed? Like actually talking about it. And again, that builds trust. Now in marriage, right? You're in covenant. So there's going to be experiences that you just don't prefer. It's simply a preference thing of I just don't enjoy this sexual experience. Yeah. There's going to be other times where you've had trauma based on a certain sexual act or activity, that there's going to be a shame response that comes up in you. And it's like, oh, well, I feel shame because I was abused this way, or I had shame because I had seen this done inappropriately, or whatever it is. And just because there's shame there doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it means there needs to be healing. So whether that's just you need to process that through with your spouse, or you need to go get outside help and get counseling to process through that, so that can actually be a healthy, safe sexual experience for you to share with your spouse, do that. But again, you're having that conversation because it doesn't stop when you get married. Like it is, you don't have, like, you still will always honor the other person in their body. So to say, hey, I've been thinking about this. I would like to introduce X, Y, or Z sexual experience.
Yeah.
What are your feelings about that? Oh, I actually have some shame about that, or I have some fear about that. Okay, cool. Processing through it. If it's a, hey, I'm not ready to do that right now, cool. If it's a, okay, cool, but I need some safety. I have some anxiety. I have some worry. I'm like anxious about this new thing. Have the experience and then check in after the experience to say, hey, how are you feeling? How is your heart about that? Is there any way that I can communicate better to you? Is there something different that I need to do with my body? Like, these are all conversations. Like, you're having sex with somebody. Like, you have to be able to talk about that.
Well, and since we're specifically talking about married couples, hopefully your spouse is the safest person possible that you could come to about this, because it's very real. for you to still potentially be dealing with some shame or trauma from a previous relationship
Correct.
with someone else. And, it could be very confusing for your spouse to maybe you've never shared it with them. So maybe they don't really know. Maybe they think that they did something to cause that trauma or shame that happened, so that there's a lot of confusion around it. And so obviously being pastors, we're going to steer you, this isn't going to be an easy conversation. And the easiest way to start that off is to have an open conversation with Jesus to say, hey, I need some major rewiring here.
Yeah.
I need some major, I need to be free from this. And maybe that'll catapult you into the steps with being able to open up with your spouse about some of those things. Because again, like you keeping that shame, you keeping that trauma is not benefiting your marriage at all.
Correct.
It's not allowing, there's space that has been cut off. You're at a roadblock. And so to be able to find that time to be able to share with your spouse and to open up and say, here's where I'm at. And maybe it's going to take a lot of baby steps. That's not for us to be able to sit here and decide what that looks like for you. But it's really important to be able to dissect that with, again, like Bridgett said, you're having sex with this person. So hopefully there is an immense trust that you have with that individual, namely your spouse, to be able to be freed from that.
And for those of you in situations where trust has been broken, know that there is freedom and healing for both parties too.
Yeah.
And so for some people, part of that healing journey may include actually like there's been such violation of trust in our relationship that having sex is actually not safe for us right now. We actually both need to be in some counseling. We actually need to pause for a little bit.
Yeah.
We actually need to deal with our own stuff so that when we are sexually intimate, that's actually a safe thing. And that's okay. Like we're saying, like everybody needs help.
Yeah.
And so these are conversations that like you shouldn't not be talking about this.
Yeah.
So we could go,
we could go on.
We could go on and on about that.
But on to the next question.
Yeah.
I love this one. What type of physical connection have created safety for you so far in our relationship? That's a big question. And then has there been anything you have not been comfortable with?
In this piece of actually reflecting, right, and saying, I feel really safe when you put your arm around me, or, whatever the experience is where I actually feel really safe in that, again, dating or married. But then also answering that question, has there been anything you've not been comfortable with? And I love, one of my favorite things is, I feel like the Holy Spirit had shared with me one time is, there's a really big difference between finding a line and intentionally crossing a line.
Yeah.
And God's not embarrassed by what you'll find.
Yeah. Yep.
And so having those types of conversations that you are wired as a human being to want sex, to want connection. And so you wanting that is not bad. And you wanting that is not taking things too far. But learning how to, be appropriate about that and say, actually, like this actually went further than I was comfortable with. And establishing that new trust connection of apologizing. Yeah. Right? Whether you're a dating person or whether you're a married person, like, hey, this was an experience. This was a physical intimacy experience that we tried. It actually did not feel safe to me. Whether that's, something that can be reintroduced later when healings come, or if that's just that's crossing a boundary for me personally, to have that apology and say, I'm sorry, even if it wasn't intentional, right? Because, oftentimes, there can be abusive situations where it is intentional manipulation, but then there's other times where it's like, I just didn't know that bothered you. I'm sorry, that was not my intention. I actually want to honor you in your body. And so having that conversation. Because here's the thing, the next question is, what is our plan for responding to feeling disconnected outside of physical connection? So, right, the brain response of, you can just slap physical intimacy onto a conflict, oh, cool. Well, we've had sex now. So all of our endorphins are like, oh my gosh, you're the best person ever.
Oh yeah. So like we got into a fight, so we're gonna have let's get over this by having sex.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is different than, hey, let's actually resolve the conflict. And the cultural slang of like make up sex. That's beautiful. And that's actually part of the glue that covenant creates.
Yeah.
When it's done as this is an expression of our reconnection, not the source of our reconnection.
Yeah, it's not the fix.
It's not the fix.
No.
It's the expression of, there's been a reconciliation. And for some couples, I'm not saying like, you have to have this, sometimes we have to have a conversation first and then we can have sex. For other couples, it's, no, we actually need to have sex to create that intimacy and then we want to go have the conversation. So it doesn't really matter the order in which it's happening, but it needs to be, it's not the Band-Aid, it's an expression, it's a connector for the conversation.
Because without the conversation, without the connection, sex is still bringing you the connection potentially. But you're right, it is just a Band-Aid. Because what did you resolve out of it?
Yeah.
And what's going to happen the next time that issue arises? Sex may not be the cure-all for it the next time around, because I think married couples have seen that play out before, where one time you're like, oh man, that was so easy to deal with. I want to fight again.
Yeah.
Because the solution for it was, well, I got to have sex out of it.
Yeah.
But the next time around, you may not be on that same page, and it's like, don't even think about it.
Correct.
Like for that to be the case.
Yeah.
But there are non-sexual ways to feel connected after that. So let's go through a few of those. And they're really easy. And, we can have them bullet pointed here, but eye contact.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Do you ever see that YouTube video of the people that would sit and they were like sitting in New York City and they'd have eye contact with people, they just offer it and people would sit and weep because it's like they felt so disconnected.
Oh, wow, no.
Wow.
So there's actually something like neurologically that happens of just that safety of having eye contact. You're actually having connection. And so, that's really fun. That's a really great way in any relation. Eye contact is probably one of the safest ways to either build trust or rebuild trust. So if you're in a situation where there's been addiction or affairs or whatever it is, and you're actually trying to rebuild trust, then this can be a great tool. It's a non-sexual physical act that can bring closeness.
Yeah.
Things like praying together. That's a very intimate thing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite resources is called the 1 Minute Pause app. John Eldridge created this, and there's different Christian meditations, different scriptures, different prayers. You can, turn on the app and sit together and just breathe and pray at the same time, going through that.
I'm convinced statements.
Yeah, I'm convinced statements. So these are the truths that I am convinced of about you. Like, I'm convinced that you are a strong. This is like, we all need to hear this from our loved ones. Like, hey, I'm convinced that you have what it takes to lead our family well. I'm convinced that you have what it takes to mother our children well. Yeah. I'm convinced that you have what it takes to honor me. I'm convinced that you have what it takes to be. I'm convinced that you're a fun partner. Like saying those types of things, like actually getting in the habit of like, those are quick. You can text your spouse that, or your boyfriend or girlfriend that. Like,
build them up.
Again, not what can I say to turn them on to give me something? No, like what can I actually say just to honor them regardless of the outcome?
Yeah. Because don't we want our spouses, don't we want our significant others to be empowered? Don't we want them to be, just to give somebody a compliment without any expectation of something in return?
Yeah.
It really says a lot.
Other things like asking for clarification. So many of us, we get in arguments not because of the actual topic, but because of the misunderstanding about the topic. So if you're feeling disconnected and you're feeling resentment and you're feeling all this stuff like trigger inside of you, like actually say, can you explain? Like,
Tell me more.
I don't understand what you're trying to say. Cool. Reading together. That can be a fun activity. It's connection. It's, it's part of that brain thing of the auditory learning.
Yeah.
Something happens in your brain. Oh, I actually want to talk about hugs for a second. So, for dating relationships, some people, the 5 love languages, right? Some people every human needs physical touch, right? Babies actually will die if they don't have physical touch. It is a biological need for touch. Now, other people have different preferences of, I'm a physical touch person, so I could have 800 hugs every day and be fine. Other people are like, okay, I've had it. I need some space. That's fine. But I'm going to talk about this. Especially, this is a wonderful way to protect purity. Your boyfriend or girlfriend should not be the source of all of your need for physical touch.
Yeah.
No.
So to be able to say, hey, are your need, how would you say it? Like, go ask for a hug today. Making sure of, like you said, like, oh, hey, I know I'm going to have a date today. Like, can I have a hug? I've asked people, I mean, I come into your house all the time, and I just hug Sarah. Like, hey, I just need some connection. I just need some safety.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to come from unhealthy sources. Like, that can come from people around. So that's actually a really good way of not actually having your boyfriend or girlfriend be the source of all of your physical needs. Like, actually asking your friends, asking safe people, like, hey, can I give you a hug? It's actually really safe. It's good.
Well, and I'm sure that this will be a topic of conversation in one of our future podcasts surrounding this. But with what you were saying, we all have these tanks within us of connection.
Yes.
And so, yes, that could be the physical side for it by, yes, like getting a hug from like a friend or something else. But it could just be that your body is seeking connection, period.
Correct.
And so it's really important. So, if you're a woman listening to this, hanging out with your girlfriends.
Correct.
And being able to do things.
Yeah.
And guys, I know that for the men to hear this, it's going to sound crazy, but you can suffice a lot of sexual desires and attraction that you have by hanging out with the guys. And again, we're talking about in a non-sexual way here, but just the
your
connection.
masculine need for connection.
Yes. We have masculine needs for connection. We have feminine needs for connection. And so you actually setting aside time to be able to do that with some people of the same sex, you're going to be filling up that connection meter, and that's really important to note on there too.
Yeah. And the last thing we have written down is co-regulation breaths. So this is actually a medical term. You can look this up, of co-regulation. It's the same idea of why they have moms and dads do skin to skin with newborns. You're co-regulating. You're creating this safe sense of, I'm not against you, I'm for you.
Yeah.
And so this is really great for conflict. This can be for any time of like, hey, I'm actually feeling a lot of anger and anxiety right now. I would love to have a conversation with you. Can we actually just breathe for a second? Breathing at the same time. It can be hugs can be part of that. Even just like putting your hand on somebody. Think about when you've had to have hard conversations. Just that hand on the knee, hand on the shoulder when you're praying, whatever. Just that physical touch, just saying, hey, I'm actually for you. I'm not against you. And that can create physical safety and connection.
Yep. So when we're doing these things and we've got a plan in place and everything else, but we're still going to be out in public at times and things like that, that term that typically has a negative stigma around it. And I'm talking about PDA, all right? So we've got an established plan. We've got some things that we've put in place to be able to check ourselves. But we're holding hands, we're doing some stuff. And does our PDA create an environment of honor? Is what I'm doing to be able to show the person I care about that I'm with, does it cast a gross vibe for everyone else? Or is that really respected well, so that anybody could be able to see that? Is it showing safety? Is it giving peace to those that are around us in that moment? And so...
Well, think about that for a second. And we all most likely will have the same answer. When you see a couple making out and all over themselves, right, in public, what do you think? You think the iconic statement, go get a room.
Right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so there is a weird sense that happens in that place. And I don't want to, it's not shame. It can be shame, right? But it's also this innate wiring inside of you of like, what's happening right now is actually meant to be private. Now, again, this goes back to if you are in a dating relationship where there's actually not enough trust, not okay. But this is like the same reason why you don't have sex in public Like there's meant to be privacy to it. It's meant to be holiness, so this is not, there's a difference between keeping something private and keeping something secret. Chris and I did a podcast on that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But this idea that like, is this creating safety? Think about the experiences that you've had. Where have you seen PDA be safe and like bringing honor?
Between married couples just walking down the hall at the mall, or I know I gave the example, I was on my way to the school and this older couple was just walking down the road holding hands and talking. Like it just makes you feel safe. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel like, okay, that is cool.
Yeah.
Here they are at that point in their life. They're still taking a walk, holding hands. Or another safe thing is, if you're walking through a crowd and say my husband would put his hand on my back, like there's a safety factor in that. And that me and the kids around me or whomever we're with, we have a presence that, okay, I'm with them. I'm taking care of them. This is good.
Yeah.
This is appropriate. This is healthy for all.
Right.
It doesn't give anybody a weird vibe.
Yeah.
It's not inappropriate. It's not at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a safe thing.
Right.
So we are out of time for our conversation today. We covered a lot of ground. So we hope that this material is something that starts a conversation. Again, we will have more in the future. We'd love to hear your response. So if you have questions from this episode, feel free, whether you found us on social media or you want to put a comment when you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, or you want to, reach out to us, Shawnee Alliance Church, send us a DM, whether on Instagram, Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Again, we will obviously protect privacy and, questions will remain anonymous.
Right.
But we would love to help you in any way that we can. And we want to be people who live out God's best design for sexuality. And like we've said before, we all deserve a better story around sex.
That's right.
So guys, thank you so much for having these conversations. And friends, thanks for listening. We're glad that you could join us.
See you next time.